Hey guys, enough with lighting, let's learn about shader graph. In this video, I'm going to cover a basic introduction of shader graph using high definition render pipeline, which is basically same in lightweight render pipeline as well. And we are also going to create a football ground material like this. And we are also going to learn how to create this parameter to change the look of our material. So let's get started. Before we start doing anything, I want to tell you that this same process can also be applied to lightweight render pipeline. Okay, to make our first shader, just right click, create shader, and here is a list of shader you can choose. But for the HDRP, I go to HDRP section and choose this lit graph shader. You can choose this other shader if you want, but they are a bit more complex than lit shader. And also this lit shader is most common used shader in high definition render pipeline. So to keep this introduction simple, I am continuing with this lit graph. Just click on this and choose a name if you want. I call this ground, and now our shader is ready. Next, we need to make a material using this newly created shader. There are two ways to do that. First, go to your existing material, and from this shader option, go to shader graph and choose this newly created ground shader. The second method is right click on this shader, go to create and click new material. This will automatically make a new material using this newly created shader graph. I call this football ground. Next, select your shader and click on this button to open shader graph editor. And you see the UI is pretty simple. In the left side, this is our blackboard. On the right side, this is our material preview window. In the center, this is our master node. In the top left corner, this is save asset button to basically save our asset. This show in project button will highlight our asset in our project. This precision mode is to allow you to choose between accuracy and the speed. This is a new feature which they have introduced in 2019.2, which is basically useful for mobile platform. This color mode is used to tag your nodes. Basically, you can choose a same color scheme for same types of nodes so that you can easily recognize them. You can even set your own defined color. Just choose color defined mode here and then right click, go to color and change your color. And now you can choose the color you want. This will basically improve the readability of nodes, and you can easily recognize them when you have a lot of them on the screen. You can hide and show your blackboard by this button, and the same thing for this material preview window. You can also change this material preview object. Just right click and change the object you want. You can even choose your custom mesh. For now, I just keep it to sphere. If you are new to shader graph, then you might be thinking what this blackboard actually does. Well, this blackboard is used to expose some properties of this master shader. For example, you can change color, metallic, smoothness, and some other properties of this material through these parameters. You can also apply different kinds of texture in this slot. So to create these kind of parameters for a material, we use this blackboard. If you are a bit confused, then don't worry, I will explain this in a minute. Next, to change any kind of property of this shader, we use node. There are two ways to create a node. You can either right click and click create node, and this will pop up our node creator window. And from here, you can choose any kind of node you want, or you can use spacebars to open this create node window. Here you can find your node by searching the name in search bar, or you can click on these categories to find your node. For example, I choose the color node to change the color of this shader. Then just connect the output of this color node into the base color of this master shader. And you immediately see that the color of our main material has changed. Now you can choose any kind of color you want. To see this effect on our main material, click on save asset, and let's go back to our main window. And now you see that the color of our material has changed. Let's quickly apply this material to our ground object. You see, even though the color of our material has changed, but there is not any parameter to change this color. So to make this color parameter available here, we use blackboard. Let's go back to our shader graph. To convert this color node into a property, just right click and choose convert to property. And you immediately see that the icon of our color node has changed, and now the color node is available in blackboard. Here you can right click and change the name you want. For example, I choose base color, click save asset, and let's go back to main window. And now you can see we have a color parameter using which we can change the color of our object. So that's why we use blackboard. We're gonna use blackboard a lot to convert these kind of properties. Let's delete this color node. Just right click and click delete and start working on our main ground material. Well, to create the ground material, first thing we need to create is the stripe. And to create the stripe, I'm gonna use a node called checkerboard. Right click, create node, and search for checkerboard. If you have ever used any kind of 3D program, then you're already familiar with this. Just click the output into the base color. I'm also gonna change this object from sphere to quad. so that we can easily visualize our texture. So how do we create stripes for our ground texture? Well, if you see that this checkerboard has a frequency option, if I increase this X frequency, you can see now we have stripes on our ground. But we don't want this middle line in the texture. So to eliminate this line, you reduce this X frequency to a really low value. For now, I set the X to 6 and Y to 0.3. I'm also gonna change the color to green because you definitely don't want a black and white texture on your ground. So just click on this color and choose a darker green and a lighter green. Then click on Save Asset to apply these effects. And let's go back to our main window. And voila, now we have stripes on our ground. The next thing I want to do is to create a property so that I can change this number of stripe counts later. So to do that, click on this plus button and choose vector1. I call this stripe count. Then simply drag and drop in the main window. You can also create a vector1 node from here and then click on this convert to property to make a property. Both way works fine. One thing I also want to tell you, if you hover your mouse over this node, it also highlights the property in the blackboard window. It is very useful to find a property associated with a node. Here I choose the default value to 6 and connect this node to the frequency. And you see now we are back to checkerboard texture because now it's applying the same 6 value, both X and Y frequency, which we don't want. We only want to change the X property. So to do that, I'm going to create a vector2 node. Just right click, create node and search for vector2 and connect this output into the frequency. And here you connect the output into the X node and in the Y node set to 0.3. Okay, now our stripes are back and our property is also set up. Click on Save Asset and let's go back to main window. You see in the expose properties section, now we have a parameter called stripe count. And now you can increase or decrease this value to change the number of stripe. Next, I want to group all these nodes so that we can easily move them around. To do that, select all the nodes and right click and choose group selection. I call this stripes. And now you can move all the nodes by selecting this main group node. The next thing I want to do is to add a grass texture on the ground because I definitely don't want a flat color on the ground. I have already imported this grass texture. To import this texture in the shader graph, just simply drag and drop inside. Then connect the output into the base color. Click Save Asset and see how this looks. You see our ground texture is applied, but the size of texture is very large. To decrease the size of the texture, we definitely increase the number of tile for this ground. Let's go back to shader graph. To increase the tile count of this texture, just right click, create node and search for tiling and offset. Here you can see that this node has a tiling parameter. Then simply connect the output into the UV slot of this texture node. Now you can change the tiling of this texture from this tiling parameters. But again, we don't want to change the tiling from this shader graph. We want to have some kind of property so that we can change them later. So to do that, again right click, create a vector2 node and convert this to tiling. And here I want to create two properties. Vector1, I call it grass tile X. Then press Ctrl D to duplicate. And I call this grass tile Y. I set the default value to 3. And then drag and drop into the shader editor. Then connect this X node in the X value and Y node into the Y value. Click Save Asset. And let's go back to main window to see how it looks. And now you can see that the size of grass texture is definitely reduced. Let me zoom in a bit. And we also have this X and Y value to change the size of this texture. So I set them to 10. And now it's looking a bit more natural. You see right now our texture is looking very flat. There is no depth in it. So let's add a normal map in our texture to generate some depth. If you already have a normal map texture, you can simply drag and drop in the shader graph. Then connect the output to the normal map input. And also connect the output of this tiling and offset into the UV node so that we can get the same tiling for this normal map as well. And make sure in the type mode change to normal. And you see now our texture is looking a bit better. But if you don't have normal map for your texture, you can easily create a automatic normal map inside the shader graph. So let's delete this one. To create a normal map from this texture, right click and search for height from normal. Then connect the output of this texture node into the input and connect the output into the normal map slot. Let's also disconnect this base color so that we can only see the effect of normal map. And now you can see we have some normal map applied to our texture. Great. Let's connect back our diffuse to the base color. You see right now our texture is looking a little bit funky because the effect of normal map is too much. So let's go back to shader graph so that we can control the effect of this normal map. To control the effect of this normal map, right click, create node and search for normal strength. Here you just connect the output into the input of this normal strength and connect the output into the normal slot. And now here you can change the strength of this normal map. For now I set this to 0.5. And now our texture is looking much better. The next thing I want to do is to combine this stripe texture with this grass texture. So how do we do that? If you look closely, this checkerboard texture has two color input. So basically what we can do, we can create two versions of this grass. One is light, one is dark, and feed them into this color slot. Right now we have a darker version of this grass. We just need to create a lighter version of this grass. So to create a lighter version of this grass, I'm gonna use a multiply node. Right click, create and search for multiply. I also need a color node. Right click, create and type color. Here choose a lighter green color. Then simply take the output of this texture into the A slot and the output of this color node into the B slot. And you see now we have two versions of this grass. Then simply connect the output into the color node of this texture slot. Great. And then simply take the output and put it into the base color. Voila, now we have a grass texture with the stripes applied in it. And we can also change the stripe rounds from this slider, which is really great. Now our texture is almost ready. We just need to add marker lines on top of this grass texture. I have already prepared this marker line in Photoshop. Let's drag and drop in the shader graph. Adding this line on top of this texture is very simple. Just search for add. Then connect the output into the A slot and output of this stripe texture into the B slot. And you see these marker lines are added on top of this texture. Simply take the output and put it in the base color. Great, now our forward texture is complete. You see right now we cannot change the texture of this grass. So let's quickly create a property for that. You see our grass texture is connected into this texture slot. So to make a property of it, right click, create node and search for texture 2D asset. Then connect the output into this texture slot. And here you choose the grass texture. Then right click, create, convert to property. I call it grass texture. You see our grass texture is gone, but don't worry, you can now choose your grass texture from this slot. And now we have our grass texture back. Before finishing this lesson, I want to show you some cool tricks you can do with this texture. If you look closely on this checkerboard texture, we have a UV node here, which means we can connect some other UV node into this slot and create a different kinds of pattern in this texture. For example, if you go to this node window here, we have a UV section. And in this UV section, we have different kinds of UV nodes. Let's say I choose this polar coordinate and I connect the output into the UV slot. And voila, now we have a totally different kinds of pattern in our texture. And it's also looking quite amazing. You can also choose some different kinds of UV texture. For example, let's choose this twirl and connect the output into the UV slot. Change some values like this. Voila, look like a futuristic ground grass texture. And this is not it. You can further connect another UV node into this UV slot to create another imaging effect. Wow, it's looking nice. Awesome. It's looking nice. So that's how you can use your shader graph to create some interesting effect in your materials. Wait, hold on a second. What is this? This is a ground texture I made in Photoshop. What? You mean you could have directly applied this texture to this main material? Just like this. And you're done. You didn't even need to make this whole tutorial. Why did you waste our time? What the hell is this? Why did you waste our time? Cause I like it. Okay, that's enough with the fun. If you have any queries, you can ask me in the comment section or you can join my Discord server. I'm also planning to make some more videos about shader graph in HDRP, so please subscribe to get the notification first. And finally, I would like to thank Spark, Hannah Sinkonen and Peter Listek for their awesome Patreon support. If you really like my work, you can, if you really like my, I don't know what to say. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye-bye.